Now, our only new release this week is the latest film by Gia Coppola. It's called The Last Showgirl, and it stars Pamela Anderson as an ageing dancer in Las Vegas, whose show, The Razzle Dazzle, has finally been cancelled after decades. It features a number of outstanding performances, and indeed Pamela Anderson herself was nominated for a Golden Globe, while Jamie Lee Curtis, who co-stars, was nominated at the BAFTAs. Now, off the bat, I'll say that I really enjoyed this film. It's kind of elegiac. I think it looks stunning. It's all shot on kind of dreamlike film. But Jake, tell me, what did you make of this? I know you saw it a couple of weeks ago.
I saw a spotlight screening. It just happened to be on, and I think that was one of our scheduling troubled weeks, but I was like, okay, well, I can't see any of the films we're supposed to see, but I'll fit this one in, and I was so glad I did, because I really did enjoy this film. To me, it bordered on almost being bad. It was very much on the edge, but everything, if it had been pushed too far, it would have gone to a bit absurd, the performances, or if it had been done any less than it did, it would have been too dull, but it just threaded the needle very nicely. I thought it was a really, really neat film. Pamela Anderson was sought out to play the lead role. Quite rightly, the script is almost crafted for her. As I said in my opening, it's a reflection. It really is a mirror image of Pamela Anderson as an actress, as a performer who went from sort of a model and was sort of shot to fame, and then also scandalous fame as well, with her history and all this sort of... It just really was so poetic to see her give such a wonderfully nuanced performance. She is playing a character, yes, but it's a person that you would know, someone that you would experience in real life, someone who has dedicated their life to something and still loves it. It's sort of hard to see someone in the later years. Often you see people in films who are so devastated or sort of jaded, or, you know, the common trope in all these legacy sequels is to have the famous good guy be in a sort of rut. But it's so nice to see, even though this character is struggling, that she still adores what she does. And Pamela Anderson gives an absolutely stellar performance in that angle. She is surrounded by, as you said in your opening, Reuben, really, really great performances. I think Jamie Lee Curtis is electric. I'm glad that she got nominated for a BAFTA. I think this film overall has been greatly snubbed, because you've also got a great supporting male performance in Dave Bautista, who is just so a quiet, gentle giant, and he just plays, he's just got so heartbreaking. It's absolutely wonderful. I thought everyone was in a perfect place. It was so well cast. That's really what really solidifies this movie. I did have a bit of a worry when I was watching the opening few scenes, because there's a scene where it opens in a grocery store and it's dreadfully out of focus.
I also noticed that. I thought, gosh, is this a stylistic choice we're going for? But I think that is just on that day they had the focus a little bit off. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, I think film's expensive. But this is the thing, that was very, very minor, and it's like, well, they could have just avoided using that shot altogether, but the directors have their vision. Maybe it was a stylistic thing in the edit that, oh, okay, we set forth this dreamlike quality. But the rest of the cinematography is quite spectacular. The use of film is really beautiful. It really does use Las Vegas to its fullest potential, I think, because I went to Las Vegas a couple of summers ago, and you really do see every side of it, sort of the glamour, but also the grunge. And I think they do a really good job. I think the really warm sense of film as a medium, the way that it captures light, really does capture the intense heat and sort of the aged glory of Las Vegas, where once it was in the 60s, 70s and 80s, you know, this great spectacle, as was Pamela Anderson's character. And the use of slightly weathered film and the sort of way that the camera moves with the dancers, but in a sort of jilted way, often from behind, looking from behind, you know, as a legacy gone by. But I thought this film was really gentle and deserves more than it's been given, I think. I'm surprised it had no representation at the Oscars, which is what we'll be talking about next. But yes, Reuben, tell me a bit about what you thought.
Yes, so I'm very much on the same page, I would say. I thought that Pamela Anderson gave an absolutely extraordinary performance. I would have loved to have seen a nomination for her at the Oscars. I think Jamie Lee Curtis, similarly, she's so interesting as an actor because she's so good at simultaneously being strong and bolshy, I think, Jamie Lee, but also like have this kind of tenderness underneath. But I just completely agree with you about the film as a whole. It has this kind of brilliant visual quality with the grain, as you said, where you get this sense of like dirty pretty, you know, it's kind of gritty, it's kind of grimy, but it's also slightly ethereal, it's also kind of glowing. And we get these wonderful kind of repeated motifs of looking up at these iconic sculptures of female figures and female bodies, and we get into this kind of idea and this theme of the way that women in Las Vegas are worshipped and objectified and powerful in their youth, but then later in life, which is where we find Pamela Anderson, all of that is turned on their head and it's lonely and it's disempowering. And I thought Pamela Anderson played that absolutely beautifully. She tells so much in the way that she dances, I think. There's a lot of very powerful characterization just through her physical movements. I watched this with a professional dancer and he said that the dancing all the way throughout was really, really well done, very technically accurate. But I was just really impressed by the way that it was really feeding into the story. And it's just the way that she holds herself during conversations too. There's a lovely scene where she and Dave Bautista go to a restaurant, and it's just things like the angle that she's got her head as she's speaking. You start getting insight into this character that you didn't have before. And the dialogue, I think, is really smart. We get drip of show don't tell exposition, I suppose you would call it, about her past and about her life. But I thought it did a really good job of seamlessly integrating that into these kind of sequences. It's really, really good. I'm shocked that it hasn't had more recognition. I wonder if to a certain extent it's a little slight. This is an 89-minute film. I think it probably could have been slightly longer. I'd happily have watched another 15-20 minutes. But it's really beautifully done. And you talked about the direction by Gia Coppola and using Vegas really well. I was interested to kind of do some research on the film and see how a lot of her influences there were from photographers and the way that they're kind of framing Vegas. Because I think so much of the worldview of the film is kind of touristic. It's enthralled to Vegas in the same way as the characters, and it becomes this kind of all-encompassing glamorous prison almost, where they love it but they hate it, and it's good for them and it's terrible for them, and all of those conflicting emotions are kind of bound up in these sweeping visuals, which are sometimes completely dreamlike and sometimes nightmarish. So I was really impressed. And do you know, maybe you can tell me something about the music, because I thought the score in this was really, really interesting. It's at times, I think, kind of synthesized. It reminded me a little bit of Beltrami's work with David Lynch. There's an ethereality to it, which I thought was really interesting. And again, it kind of blurs the line at times between, are we watching something that is a tragedy or is it something closer to horror?
There's a lot about score I'll talk about in this episode because I've got a lot to say. But this film, it's been so overlooked. It is so mesmeric, the score. You almost blend into the whole environment of it. I think The Brutalist is the same. The Brutalist had a kind of bombastic nature. The majority you sort of blend in with the film, and I think that's really worthwhile. And I think this film does a great job because everything favors everything else. Everything supports it. So the cinematography supports the beautiful performances. The beautiful lighting supports the cinematography. The beautiful score supports the beautiful action. And I do think that it's so well married, all of these elements all together. You know, I think at the time when I listened to it, when I watched the film, it just really, I was quite blown away with the score. I thought it was delicate, but also, as you said, you know, the artificiality of it really did lend itself to some of the conflict that was going on in the film. There's a conflict between how people live their lives and what people consider worthwhile, how they spend their lives. As creatives, you know, Reuben, you and I are, you know, we spend a lot of our time worrying and stressing and focusing on things that other people would think was absolute trash. And so I think, you know, it really spoke to me on that level. And, you know, the score also helped with that. I also loved all the needle drops, the actual soundtrack. It's a beautiful song by Miley Cyrus that shows up at the end.
Which should have been Oscar nominated, surely. What an amazing song. Beautiful That Way, it's called. I loved that. It's used phenomenally as well in that closing scene. I think it's no spoiler to say that's where it pops up. I loved that. I was so knocked out by that as a needle drop.
Shocked, disturbed, appalled that it didn't get nominated and probably should have won. It's just perfect use. It's a really well-crafted film. And the fact that using that Miley Cyrus song, someone who comes from this tenure of always being on screen, and yet her voice is so rich and with experience and pain, and then it just tailors itself to this film. Pamela Anderson's history really makes this film more than it is. Even Brenda Song, she grew up on the Disney Channel as well. And so sort of all this stuff of people who seemingly lost their way because the world said no. You don't deserve this chance. You don't deserve to still be adored. Then, this is the film that really just holds a middle finger up to a lot of that. I know that Pamela Anderson often talked about the Pam and Tommy TV series and this film as a response to sort of her own life being once again paraded without her consent. And this film really just puts into context that she is a human being, because the performance is so wire thin to real life. It's still a performance. It's not herself. She's not this character, but the public eye sees this as Pamela Anderson, sees the lead role as just completely absorbed in. I'm really grateful that she was given this opportunity. I heard a story that Gia Coppola wanted to send it to her, but her agent rejected it in under half an hour, and eventually through her son that the script got to her. And then she immediately said yes, quite rightly. Go see it. It's out. It's not been given the recognition it deserves. Go see it. Every facet of it is brilliant, apart from that one shot that's really out of focus. But get over that, because it only lasts a couple of seconds. But yes, no, I think it. All these things, they just come together to create a really perfect movie. I personally didn't think it needed to be longer. I thought, yes, you've given us this neat package. I got everything. It's a real nice test. I don't want to learn more. I don't want to learn less. I think it was so nicely put. And so, yeah, I really, really rate it.